Bienvenidos a Spondylus. El día de hoy nos visita la realizadora de cine de Líbano, Farah Kassem. Bienvenidos. Farah, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. And could you please tell us a little bit about yourself? Where you're from? Why are you in Ecuador right now? And what is it you do currently?
Absolutely. Thank you, Alex, for having me here at Universidad Andina Simón Bolívar. It's a pleasure to be here with you and in this room. Well, I am, as you said, I'm a Lebanese filmmaker. I'm based in Brussels at the moment. I'm also a researcher. I'm doing a PhD in the arts in Brussels. And I am here because I got the chance to be invited with my film. We are inside to EDOC Festival. And this is my very first time in Ecuador. And I'm delighted and honored to be here and to present my film and to meet the audience of this festival and to be in Quito and to meet the people of Quito.
I know your film is a very important piece in this edition of EDOC. Can you tell us a little bit about your film? What's it about? How did you start the research for the film? And what were the, let's say, the most important challenges you had to face?
If I would to be completely honest with you, the film came from this need to freeze time and to take the time actually to understand, to preserve the presence and the existence of a certain generation in Lebanon, which my father is part of this generation, and also to freeze time in order to have a moment to understand what do we inherit from this generation, what do we keep, and what do we keep aside as the generation of today. And but this was not very conscious at the very beginning of making this film. What I wanted to do was actually to actually postpone death and to be able to have a project that I can share with my dad, where together we were making a film. So back then I was living in Berlin, and I felt the need to go back home, and I went back to Lebanon to be with my dad, who was back then in his 80s, and he was not doing well health-wise. And we are very close friends, but whenever we talk about politics, about identity, about what it means to be a citizen of that country, of Lebanon, what it means to be a citizen in Tripoli, north of Lebanon, which is the second biggest city, what does it mean to vote today and to be politically active? Whenever we would have these conversations, we would go into fights and clashes. And then we would end up not talking to each other for hours until he would come and knock on my door with a little piece of paper in his hand. And then he would tell me, have I read you my latest poem, my daughter? So my dad is a poet, and he has always been a poet. And then after retirement, he really took the time to dive more into poetry, and especially after the death of my mother, which was a kind of catharsis for him to feel and write and archive his sentiments and his states. And then, voila, he would start reading to me his poetry, and he loved to use all these complicated old classical Arabic words that my generation, or me at least, don't understand at all. So I would look at him, not understand a word of what he's saying, but then still find pleasure and joy in just looking at him being completely rejuvenated by this art, by the words, by the rhythm. And I noticed how poetry in some way was actually keeping him alive. And this is when actually he then told me, well, since you're here and you're not doing anything, how about you come with me and visit my poetry club? So my dad has been an active member of the Tripoli Poetry Club, which takes place every Monday at 5 p.m. at an attorney's office, where men, like 11 men, sometimes 15, sometimes 20, meet every Monday. They bring their sweets, and they're all diabetic, and they bring their poetry, and they meet for hours to talk about poetry, to read their poems, to talk about a word that no longer exists, and to eat some sweets in between, and discuss the value of a word over another word, and the choices of their sentences. And this is when I was completely, I think that was the moment where I felt that actually this generation is actually trying to persist and preserve and practice the remains of their culture within these indoors and within these corners. because all of them were very political in the past, and they're still there. They were always political. But they were kind of silenced, especially with the civil war and everything that happened in Lebanon after. There are people who believe, there are a generation who believed in the possibility of a strong state that is there democratically for its citizen. And I think they were somehow disappointed with what things turned out to be. And for me to see them practice the remain of that and talk about a word that no longer exists, while in the background, outdoors, the city is falling apart and the country is falling apart, was something that I felt strongly. And this is when I felt the need to actually archive that moment of time, that transition, and that transition that the country is going through, but also the transition from one generation to the other, what they are trying to tell me, and what am I keeping from their lessons, and how, and what kind of future I would like to imagine.
How did you address the different time levels in your documentary? There's memory, there's the past, there's a lot of generations, and there is a current generation doing the film in this case, and so there's a different level in approaching the time. How did you manage that? What decisions did you take?
I like to work with limitations, and there were many limitations in the methodological approach. One of them was to only film in the interiors and to look at the outside through these interiors, and to think and deal with that frontier that exists between the private space and the public space. Because for me, the film was a lot about negotiations, whether it was with the space, or with the generation, or with my father, with the language, with everything. So what happened is that we wanted initially to film over the period of a year, to actually witness the season change and feel the time passing. And then whenever we would think that, okay, we have reached some sort of understanding of the film, and maybe we can now stop, something would happen, and this thing would invite us or force us in a way to look, to gaze even more, or to change our gaze, to shift gazes. And this is what happened over the period of 4 years. Like I would be looking at something as the main protagonist of the film, and then something would happen outside of my window, which happened to be in front, my parents' place happens to be in front of a military base. And then everything, whenever there's something happening in the country, you can just feel it from just looking out of the window. And then over the period of 4 years, there was always something happening, whether it was in the interior or the exterior, inviting me to shift my focus, to shift my gaze. And it was as if, and I think what happened is that we kept on floating with the reality, and while we were filming, the act of filming itself became an act of understanding the present moment. And this is why for me, the present moment, the film is very much in the present moment, but I knew very well that this present is condensed, and it contains in it the past, and it contains in it the future. And the accumulation of everything, of all the dynamics that exist in the film are affected by the past, by what is this country, how it was created, how did we reach this moment of crisis, why today in 2019, I mean in the film in 2019, there was a revolution, why there was a crisis. I mean, I don't talk directly about these moments, these key moments in the film. They are somehow there, but because for me, I really wanted to experience them from the interior, from the intimate, from the personal, that is very, very much political, and that is very much affected by this dynamic of change and of power, with our relation to the state, and how the state is somehow affecting our interiors, and how we are always in negotiations. So I think also the way we treated time was a way to be really present in the present, and then understand the extension of that present, and how we are affected by the past, and how we are trying all the time to be able to build the future, and not to be slaves of a future that we don't really want.
Is memory part of this complex of geopolitics? You have been living in different countries. You go to live in other cities and countries, and you come back to Lebanon, and which is a very tense region, and memory seems to be something very personal and intimate, but at the same time it is entangled with all these geopolitical tensions. How do you approach that? How do you read that?
There was a big decision that we took with the team and with my producer, which is to be as local as possible. We really wanted to focus on the city of Tripoli and on the landscape of that city, because Lebanon is very centralized on Beirut, and all the different parts of the country has suffered from that, of this centralization. And we wanted actually to be there, to be in the city, feel the rhythm of the city, the political landscape of the city, and how the citizens of the city live there every day. So of course we are affected, especially that we are also close to Syria, and there is a cultural and historical relationship with Syria that is much more present in Tripoli. So we were very much affected by the violence and of the regime, and how this terror happened in Syria and affected the country itself, and also had resonance on us, because also we lived under the Syrian army presence for a long time, and we were also victims of it. So we don't speak about this directly in the film, but for somebody who knows the city, who lives the city, you can sense this accumulation these nuances. And then we had to decide when to stop. The film, actually, we were still filming even after the explosion of 2020, and we took a decision not to involve the explosion, or not to include it in the film, because first of all, the entire country lived it somehow in a similar way. It was such a violent moment that kind of destroyed us completely in all the possible senses, but also in the north. Being in the north, the experience of that, it was. I think these big moments that happened on the political timeline, I do believe, or at least myself as a filmmaker, I want to take the time to understand them before being able to frame them and talk about them in the filmic medium. And this is why the revolution by itself, the revolution of 2019, was not something. We lived it differently than how we framed it in the film. Like when it happened, it was the moment that I broke out of these interiors, and I took my camera and I went down on the street, and I was a filmmaker, a citizen, a daughter, an active person in this revolution. And then the camera was looking everywhere. It was eclectic. It was no longer static and grounded. It was floating in that space that never witnessed this communal gathering in any way. It was like taking back the public space and claiming it. So there was something very strong about it in the moment. There was some sort of euphoria that changed with time. And the time we took to edit, which was like around 3 years, allowed me to be able to look at the revolution in a way that is rooted in this euphoria and is rooted in this need for it, but also after this revolution, we went back inside, and the camera continued to be grounded and static. And this is why what I like in my films is to look at the moments that happen in between the big moments. It's not about the big moments. It's actually what happened in between. And this is what defines the everyday. And this is what defines this big historical moment that reshapes the political landscape of a country. So voilà. And then after that, a lot happened after 2020, and then the genocide happened, and the war on Lebanon happened. But then the film had already finished. But what I find interesting is how this work of art or any film can still dialogue with the present time, and be able to still be coherent or not with the present time. Is there a dissonance? Is there a continuation to that discourse or not? And I think more than ever that the film was a proof that people will do everything to in a violent context, or in a context where their dreams are shattered, or where the possibility of living their whatever utopia or heterotopia is somehow not possible. They always find a way to access that space where they can find a reason to stay alive, whether it's poetry, whether it is singing, whether it is like there's a beautiful protagonist in my film who's a doctor, who's somebody who's always decorating his office for the people who come to see him, for his patients, or throwing graduation ceremonies for his patients. And this way, for me, I was very much mesmerized by his need of celebrating every time, And I think that these are acts of resistance that are rooted in the everyday, and that help us live this everyday and try to shape it in a way that can resonate with us and keep us alive. And I do believe that today more than ever, this resistance is needed when we're facing a genocide that has been archived in every possible way, and that is still not. I mean, globally there is a change. I do feel that there is a change regarding the Palestinian cause, but still today, like for this genocide to be happening for still 2 years, and for attacks to be still happening in the Arab world.
Farah, could you tell us a little bit about how you are reading in your film the everyday of your characters? How is that like?
What I found astonishing while making the film throughout those 4 years, because Lebanon went through a lot of different moments. There were the elections that happened after 9 years of no elections. So I had the chance to witness how people were reacting to the impossibility to change the political landscape of Lebanon, and to be active in those decisions when there's already a sectarian system in place that will continue to exist, sadly, that continues to exist. So for me, what I found really important is when I saw my dad, when I saw these poets, when I saw these doctors who are all like either completely obsessed with poetry or with singing or with celebrating with like the doctor who was always trying to find moments to celebrate the health of his patients. This was something very unique, because I realized how everyone in those situations of violence, where death is very nearby, where wars are very nearby, where genocide are there, and we're witnessing them every day, and we know that they could. I mean, in Lebanon, we had the war not long ago, and it very much. Destabilized us on many levels, and we've been witnessing the genocide for 2 years. So for me to see that these parallel spaces are urgent, are important for people to keep on somehow resisting in their everyday by deciding to they know that death is there. They see it. They see the blood. They see the shattered bodies, but also they are born and sadly there's a normalization of these aesthetics, which is very problematic. But still, their resistance on an everyday base, when it's not through protest or trying to be active politically and to reshape actually the global opinion about Palestine and the righteousness of this cause, it also happens through the words, through poetry, through wanting to feel life in all its layers, and to reclaim life actually, and reclaim the need to stay alive and to celebrate it in a way. So we live in these contrasts, and the film somehow touches on this contrast.
Dear Farah, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the luck with all your future projects, and I hope to be hearing from you in future films.
Thank you for having me here. This conversation has been a pleasure, and again, thank you for hosting me.